Welcome back to the Breaking Our Borders podcast. I'm Dr. Michelle Border, and in today's episode, I will explain what abuse, neglect, and trauma are. I will also explain what experiencing these three conditions do to our mind and body, and talk about the borders that are created in our minds from these experiences. Join me now as we begin breaking more of our borders together. Before I begin talking about what abuse, neglect, and trauma are, I would like to tell you about parenting styles. There are different parenting styles that a parent can use, and not all of these necessarily involve abuse or neglect. There are 4 different parenting styles that I will explain now. The first one is called the authoritative method. In this parenting style, parents enforce rules, but they are also warm and supportive. This is the ideal parenting method where a child is provided with structure, learning experiences, support, encouragement, and love. The next method is called the authoritarian method. In this type of parenting, the parent is domineering, dictatorial, enforces punishments. They are unsupportive of the child's needs and growth, and physical or emotional abuse may be used as punishment. The permissive method is another parenting style. This type of parent is lenient, makes few demands on the child, and may see the child as their friend. With this parenting style, not a lot of guidance is given to the child's learning and development. The child is often left to figure things out on their own. This parent is often loving, but sometimes so loving that they adore their child and think that the child can do no wrong. The child may think that whatever they do is good and may not develop a strong sense of values or morals. The last parenting method is called the uninvolved method. In this type, the parent is neglectful. They provide little guidance and support in their child's learning and growth. The neglect may be physical or emotional or possibly both. The parent may be physically there, but they do not interact or guide their child much. Parenting can come in a combination of these types. Some people may say, my parents weren't great, but they also weren't abusive. No parent is perfect, of course, but even if you weren't abused, your parents may not have been able to fulfill all of your emotional needs. Usually because they didn't know how. They may not have been shown how from their own parents and are repeating the same parenting style. I believe this is the case in my parents' situation. A lot of what they did to me was what was done to them as children, and so they were just repeating that parenting style. When parents aren't positive, supportive, this is called dysfunctional parenting. It's when negative parenting styles are used. And this type of parenting happens when a family unit experiences conflict or abuse regularly, and the emotional needs are not consistently met for the child. Again, this is usually caused by a parent's own unresolved trauma, attachment wounds, mental issues, or personality disorders because this is what they experienced in their own childhood. Dysfunctional parenting can happen in a couple of different ways. It could come out as physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. It could be physical or emotional abandonment, or physical or emotional neglect. And now I'd like to describe each of those types. I'm going to start by explaining what abuse, neglect, and trauma are. So the definition of abuse and neglect is any act or a failure to act on the part of a parent or caretaker, which results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse, or exploitation of a child. Let's talk further about each of these types of abuse. Abuse itself can come in the form of emotional, physical, or sexual experiences. Physical abuse is defined as any intentional act causing injury or trauma to another person's body through physical contact. This can include a range of behaviors from hitting, slapping, and punching, using objects to batter a child, as well as other severe forms of violence. Emotional abuse is a pattern of the caregiver that causes or has a strong potential to cause serious harm to a child's emotional, cognitive, social, or physical development. It involves both deliberate actions as well as failures to act, and is generally not an isolated incident, but a prolonged behavior. Emotional abuse is behaviors that create fear or intimidation by controlling a child's activities and relationships through isolation from friends and family, threats on their safety, demeaning them, shaming them, humiliating them, providing constant criticism, ridicule, or teasing, instilling self-doubt and worthlessness. A consistent lack of emotional support, encouragement, validation, nurturing, paired with constant criticism of their feelings and no encouragement for growth. Victims may not recognize this type of abuse because it is subtle. It usually happens slowly over time, and because the wounds are not seen like that with physical abuse. This is where the borders in our minds are created, forming unhealthy messages about who we are, what we feel, and how to react with the world. Sexual abuse is a form of child abuse that involves engaging children in sexual activities that they do not understand, cannot consent to, or developmentally unprepared for, and that violate legal and social norms. The abusers, unfortunately, are often known to the child and could be family members, caregivers, teachers, and authority figures who exploit their positions of trust. Now let's talk about neglect. Neglect can also be a physical or emotional form. Physical neglect is the failure of a parent, guardian, or caregiver to provide a child with the basic necessities of life, such as adequate food, clothing, shelter, supervision, and medical care, which can endanger their health and safety. Emotional neglect is the failure of a caregiver to meet a child's emotional and psychological needs for nurture, attention, and stimulation. It involves a consistent pattern of ignoring, rejecting, or not providing the appropriate emotional support, which can seriously harm a child's emotional development and well-being. Examples of this include a lack of affection, not showing any emotion, failing to provide support or encouragement, or allowing a child to feel worthless or alone. Another form of this is called emotional abandonment. The parent is physically present but does not recognize their child's emotional needs and/or does not support or validate the child's feelings. This can be a lack of emotional engagement, overlooking the child feeling they have to be strong, a fear of abandonment, or even trust issues. Emotional neglect is another type where children's emotional needs are just completely disregarded, not validated, and or met with indifference. The difference between this and abandonment is that the parent will invalidate or criticize the child's feelings. The opposite of this type of neglect and abuse is called emotional validation, recognizing, accepting, and affirming another person's feelings, and providing guidance in how to regulate and cope with emotions. In my previous episode, I spoke about children needing to be taught everything. That includes emotional and social skills. If a toddler is having a meltdown because they can't get their way, and the parent ridicules them or punishes them for it, ignores what they're doing, and doesn't provide any guidance in how to work through it, that child's never going to learn how to positively interact when they feel frustrated. When someone feels long-term neglect or abuse, the result is what we call trauma. It is caused by a deeply distressing or disturbing event that has had a significant and lasting negative impact on an individual's mental, physical, emotional, or social well-being. Typically, when we think of trauma, we think of our body physically being hurt, a physical trauma to the body that takes us to the ER. But there's also psychological trauma. Childhood trauma is caused by exposure to abuse or neglect from parents over a long period of time. There are several results of experiencing abuse or neglect in any form. A child can begin to have feelings of loneliness and isolation, like no one is on their side, no one sees them as important, and no one wants them to be around. The border created in their mind is, no one wants to be with me, I'll be alone forever, no one is going to ever support me, so I have to take care of myself. Another result of abuse or neglect is that your emotions are not important. No one recognizes or supports your emotions. So then a border is created in our minds that say, my feelings don't matter. I shouldn't bother anyone by expressing them. And I'm going to just suppress those emotions. I'm going to just kind of push them away deep down inside me so that I don't have to feel them. Nobody wants me to feel them or share them, so I'm just going to make them disappear. Self-worth issues can result because of abuse or neglect. Our parents are our first experience of being accepted into the world and giving us an impression of who we are. If I'm not important to my parents, who should value me more than anyone else in the world, then I must not have anything valuable to offer. The border created in our mind is thinking I'm worthless and the world would be better off or not affected if I'm not here. Self-esteem issues will arise through abuse and neglect. After consistently being told that you are a burden, not smart, not talented, or criticized for everything you do, you will develop borders of thinking you're not good at things. It creates self-doubt. You question everything you do as to whether or not you're good enough to handle it. It will hinder your self-confidence at trying new things because you'll develop that border of, I'm not good at anything. I'm just a burden to everyone. The kind of opposite of that then is over-reliance on ourselves. If no one was there to help you, or if the parent left adult responsibilities for you to take care of, it will create the border in your mind of thinking that you have to do it all. You can't ask for help. And if you do think about it, you're probably going to be bothering them, burdening them. You don't want to do that. So you'll often take on more work than you can handle so as to not upset others by asking for help. A similar problem with these issues is people pleasing. People pleasing is doing things just so other people will be happy. If I do this, mom won't get mad at me today. If I do this, dad won't beat me. Those kinds of things happen when children experience abuse and neglect. This creates a border that makes you think, the more I do, the more right things I do, or if I do what makes them happy, then those people will like or love me. They will accept me and be happy with me. People-pleasing does not allow for what you want, and you will push yourself to limits to please others and not do what you truly want to do. You completely ignore your own needs to provide for others in the hopes that they will love you and accept you. Another issue is the need for validation. We crave acceptance from the time that we are born. And when we don't get that from our parents early on, we search for it from anyone that we encounter. Friends, partners, coworkers, bosses, other family members. While it is the parent's job to provide this as we grow up, once we are adults, we have to break the border of thinking we need this from others and provide it for ourselves. Imposter syndrome is another problem that can occur through emotional abuse. This creates a border in our mind that says, even if we are successful, we're probably faking it. We don't deserve it. or we haven't earned the credit. We live with the fear that people will figure out who we really are, who our parents told us we were, that we were stupid, incapable, not qualified to do what we're doing. Because of all those negative thoughts we were told when we were children, those voices are in our minds telling us people are going to figure that out. That's the truth because our parents told us that. And eventually someone's going to figure out we are an imposter. We're not really a good person. We're not really smart. We're not really qualified to be doing this. Dealing with abuse and neglect can bring up anger. As human beings, we have emotional needs. We need those needs to be fulfilled. When those needs are not met, we can become frustrated and angry that we didn't get them or that we don't know how to fulfill them. In children, this can come out as misbehavior. In adults, it can possibly result in addictions. We don't want to feel the pain of the anger, the frustration, the lack of knowing what to do to meet our own needs, so we find ways to numb that pain. Social incompetence is also a problem. As we're growing up, we're often not taught social skills or self-control by our parents. So we are unaware of what is okay, typical, or a correct action in social situations. Some people will retreat into themselves and completely avoid socialization because they're not used to being involved with others, or they just don't know what to do. Another issue is that of avoiding self-care. There's a border created in our minds thinking, I'm not worthy of time for myself. I constantly search for love and accepted in people-pleasing, and that takes up time. We are unaware of what we like to do for ourselves because that was never an option. But it's okay to say, hey, I need a break, or I want to do this for me instead of for you sometimes. People who experience abuse and neglect often have trouble with trust. Trust of themselves and trust of others. When a border is created in your mind that you're a mess up, you're not smart, or you're inadequate, you don't feel like you can trust yourself to make decisions. You're probably going to make the wrong decision because you're too stupid to know how to make the right one, so just don't make one at all. Don't do anything new because you might mess that up. We also have a mistrust of the other people around us. We couldn't trust our parents to be a positive place for us to land, so we learn to mistrust others as well. We never know what's going to come out in them. Feelings of guilt and shame may arise in people who have experienced neglect and abuse. The border of thinking that you are never enough for your parents can lead to feelings of guilt and shame of being so worthless and incompetent. You're just not even worth being on this planet. You do nothing good for others. And so you just feel shame that you're even here, that you are even taking up space. A lot of this can lead to personality disorders. There's a group of mental health conditions that can cause patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that are extremely different from cultural expectations, that cause distress or impairment in mental and emotional well-being. Some examples of these I will discuss in later podcast episodes, but a few of them are antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder. There's avoidant personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. This is not the same as obsessive compulsive disorder, and I will discuss the difference between those in another episode. There are more identified disorders, but for now, I would just want to mention those. Codependency is another thing that can happen. This is when a person's sense of self-worth is tied to another's needs, often involving unhealthy attachment. Typically, they have low self-esteem and use enabling behaviors. We have the border in our minds that we're not worthy of relationships or not good enough to be with someone. So we choose codependent relationships where we feel fueled by giving the other person what they need in the relationship without expecting to have our own needs met. We feel good about ourselves because we made someone else happy. Identity issues can also be a problem. In abusive and neglectful childhoods, we were not given opportunities to explore our own personalities, likes, dislikes, and interests. We had to be the only way that was acceptable to our parents. As adults, we struggle to figure out who we are, what we want to do, or what relationships we want to be in. Sometimes we take on the personalities of whoever we are with because we like how they act or want to fit in with them. These can all lead to anxiety, depression, and hypervigilance. Those conditions are caused by long-term trauma. Now let me explain about parts of the brain that are impacted by trauma. There are many parts of our brain, but I'm going to focus on the 3 that are most impacted by trauma. I'll post a picture of these parts of our brain on our website in my blog section. First, let me talk about the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of our brain right behind our forehead. In generalized terms, this part of our brain regulates emotions and is the rational thinking part of the brain. It makes sense of the who, what, and why of our thoughts. When our thoughts are negative due to trauma, this part of the brain connects unpleasant thoughts to events. Parents are not a safe place for me, so maybe other parents aren't safe. Maybe all adults are not safe. It also regulates our emotions. So when the emotions are always negative, this part of the brain identifies those emotions as normal and struggles to create ideas of positive emotions. The next part of our brain I'm going to talk about is called the hippocampus. This part is at the base of the brain, next to the brain stem. It works with the prefrontal cortex to consolidate emotional and perceptual information. It is responsible for our memories and connecting past experiences with the present. In trauma, the hippocampus stores the negative thoughts and connects them to future events or connects them to similar people and situations. For example, if I feel fear and worry in a situation like this before with this person, I need to prepare for more danger because this is what has happened in the past. This is called hypervigilance. I'll explain more about hypervigilance in my next episode. The last part of our brain I'm going to talk about is the amygdala. It is above the hippocampus, right in the middle of our brain. This part of the brain signals fear and controls when fear should be turned on or off. This part of our brain becomes overactive when exposed to long-term trauma. The anticipated fear of danger takes over, and this part of the brain stays stuck in anticipation mode. This is the trauma responses of fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. The impact of trauma on the brain development depends on the timing of the trauma exposure in the child's life, how long it occurs across the course of development, and makes a difference on what impacts will take place for each person. I want to tell you some impacts that trauma can have on a child. So I just spoke about fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Our minds and our bodies get stuck in these modes every time something seems dangerous, confrontational, or uncomfortable. It's a human instinct that if danger approaches, we typically fight against it or we flight, like running away. We've recently found out there are 2 other kinds, so let me talk about each of those a little bit now. The fight is a reaction to a situation with anger or aggression. Someone's coming at me, fist raised, I'm going to fight back. Flight is the running away, whether it's physically or mentally, from the situation. So it's not always physically retreating away from the problem. It can be a mental shutdown to get away from the situation. Freeze is just that. We just stop. It becomes a feeling of numbness, dissociation, or disconnection from our feelings, shutting down and ignoring the thoughts and feelings or putting them away. We just don't deal with it. We just block it out. Fawn is ignoring one's own needs to focus on and provide for others' needs to keep them happy. It's a persistent fear of being rejected, abandoned, or having conflict. So in this type of situation, a person kind of sees the danger coming and tries to figure out what can I do to extinguish the danger, to make them happy, to make them not attack me. When you have trauma, the hippocampus has a disruption of the memories. The effects of trauma on this part of the brain leads to lessened memory functions, which can hinder learning, and increases the likelihood of mood disorders like anxiety and depression. Our amygdala overreacts to responses of stress. So due to the long-term activity of abuse or neglect, the amygdala gets stuck in that fight or flight response. It produces too much cortisol and adrenaline, which will affect the structural design of this part of the brain. This also leaves us in emotional dysregulation, feeling of unable to calm down. Again, this is what we call hypervigilance. The prefrontal cortex actually becomes underactive for decision making. When the amygdala is overactive, excessive signals are sent to the prefrontal cortex, heightening the anxiety and impulsivity. Trauma disrupts the connection between the prefrontal cortex and other parts of the brain that are involved in emotion processing and decision making. Soul distortion of purpose, worth, or truth can also happen when experiencing long-term trauma. We believe the negative comments of our parents and can't see other positive ideals about ourselves. We build borders in our minds that are based on the lies that our parents told us. Those borders follow us well into adulthood and can cause problems with decision making, having healthy relationships, and having positive self-esteem and worth. Toxic shame is another thing that can happen due to trauma. It's a coping mechanism that tells us that we're too much or too little. That if we were just perfect, we will be loved. And I say coping mechanism because, again, this is happening to a child. In a child's mind, we're trying to figure out, what can I do to make it better? What can I do to make the bad stuff stop? If we're told that we're too much or not enough, we try to figure out how to be that. The results are we are ashamed of how awful we are and how much of a burden we are to others. We will do whatever we can not to burden others, to resist expressing our true selves because that's not the right way to be, and may overdo our abilities to prove our goodness and worth to others. Sadly, trauma can also cause physical impacts. Trauma causes the brain to stay in that fight or flight mode, which produces the stress hormones of cortisol and adrenaline. The overactiveness of these chemicals cause physical symptoms and illness in the body. There are too many for me to list right now, but what I will mention is that the tension of anxiety can be held in our muscles, causing pain, in our intestines, causing problems with stomach pain, bowel issues, and digestive problems. Not dealing with trauma can continue to affect a person mentally, physically, and emotionally for years. How we are raised and the experiences we encountered through our childhood makes an impact on how we live our adult lives. Understanding what happened to you, what the results are of those experiences, and how you can improve those impacts can change the quality of your life now. I'm going to put a link to the book, I Didn't Choose to Be Born: How to Recover from Being Raised by Emotionally Distant, Neglectful, Unsupportive, or Narcissistic Parents, and Reclaim Your Sense of Self-Worth and Inner Peace, by Linneo Ratia. I'll put that on my website. She covers a lot of what I talked about today and does an excellent job of explaining parenting styles, the effects of those styles on their children, and how to heal from those impacts. It really enlightened me about what happens over time that creates those borders in our mind. Continue to join me at Breaking Our Borders in future episodes as I tell you more about those impacts and how you can change the quality of your life to be healthier and happier. Be sure to follow me on your favorite podcast provider, on Facebook, Instagram, and now on TikTok. Don't forget to check out my website at breakingourborders.com for more information, my blog post, and those suggested readings I mentioned before. Thanks for listening.